Hello, welcome to Quackalope, and today we are bringing you a Before You Back on Lander, which is a new game coming to Kickstarter from Intrepid Games. Now, Before You Back is a new series on this channel. We have a few games that we're currently experimenting with this format for.
I'm excited.
We'll see how it goes. We've been developing it with our Patreon community, talking about kind of the things we want to cover, the importance of having a little bit of a wider conversation around Kickstarter games. Without needing to, vote in favor or against them necessarily. The goal of this video series, and we won't always have, I have Jan here, Quackalope adjacent. I have Matt here from Oath and Root fame.
Special guest.
Actually from Scythe fame, if we're going to be honest.
True.
We won't always have all three of us, but we wanted to cover a few games where we had a kind of breadth of conversation. What this series is going to do, we're going to break down about 8 different categories that we try to consider, we think is important to consider when evaluating Kickstarters. Now, I've backed close to 90 projects. I'm a super backer.
Wow,
I think you guys are both super backers as well.
Same here. I'm getting up there. I'm there.
So I feel like, both with our history in the board game world, the amount of games we play, along with the fact that we are active and avid Kickstarter supporters, covering or observing games and trying to give you all, the audience, as much information as possible before you try to make a decision is important. Along with that, I do have to go ahead and thank Intrepid Games for sponsoring this video. They're actually a large reason why we developed the Before You Back series. They have, and we'll dip into this a little bit later in this video, but spread 120 copies of their games across the world to local FLGSs, friendly local game stores, for fans to sit down and interact with Lander before it actually comes to Kickstarter.
Very unique strategy.
It's an interesting one. They reached out to us and asked us to cover their game in a way similar to how we've covered games in the past, that look at the elements, the components, and try to let the audience know if it's going to be a game for them. Because like us, they feel that people who love their game should back it, should table it, should make it come to life. And people who it really won't be for, they're fine with them not supporting it as well. That's why they've made it available for people to playtest. So, thank you to them. And let's go ahead and swing into this format. We're still working on the flow of it, so pardon us if we stumble along a little bit, and let us know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like to see covered, or if you have any questions. I'm sure the Quackalope team and the Intrepid Games community will be down there helping us answer and address any questions or concerns you might have. So in this format, we're going to start off by touching on the overview and the flow of the game. Basically a 60-second pitch on what this game does so you can understand the context for what we're talking about. After that, we're going to dive into the theme, something that I and the channel, because of me, is forced to care a lot about.
Always important.
It's for me at the end of the day. Then we're going to go into the gameplay. Not how to play the game, but the elements of the gameplay that we think stand out, that might make you decide to back or not back this game eventually. After that, we're going to look at the accessibility. How likely is it to get this game to the table, and how much effort will it take on you and your gaming's group in order to do so? Then we're going to focus on points of interest. Is there anything outside of that gameplay that stands out? For instance, one of those could be their marketing model. That is a point of interest that I think is worth highlighting. Beyond that, we're going to look at the development factor. We get prototypes. That's how we view Kickstarter games. We get unfinished rule books, things that are changing between now and when the backers will get it. And we want to ask the question of how developed do we think this is? Not that every prototype has to be finished or refined.
At launch. But how polished is it at launch?
But where is it at launch? If they just get the components they're looking for, the extra artwork they need, will this be a finished game? Right? That's the question. Then we're going to talk about the publisher a little bit. Now, this will be different for every video. We have to have the scale and context necessary. And we're actually going to start sending out a questionnaire to the publishers that we work with who want this type of video, asking about their history, where the design came from, what some of their plans are, so that we can speak as accurately as possible through kind of the words that they've given us. We have talked with the developers of Lander to some degree to kind of pick their brains on where the idea came from and what their hope for the future is. The final thing we're going to look at is going to be value. Do we think you should go all in at launch? Should you get the metal coins? Or is the base game itself kind of a self-contained thing?
Is it enough?
Do we think there's room for expansions to exist? Or is it heavy enough on its own that maybe you can wait a bit before you get everything? Now, another context for this, for a lot of these games, we won't know everything that's going to be there. Some of the Kickstarter stretch goals won't be released. We won't know about all the expansions. It depends on really the publisher we're working with. But we can speak towards our experience with the prototype, and we can talk towards how we would approach a game, right? Or how maybe you should approach the game. So, are we ready to swing into this?
I hope so.
Starting over here with Matt, can you give me an overview of what this game is?
This is a game where you are landing on a remote, is it a planet? Another planet? And you are establishing a colony.
Yeah.
Now, there are other games out there that you are establishing a colony. This one brings it home a little bit more because it's hard. There are disasters that happen from time to time, so you have to deal with those.
Yeah, in terms of the flow of the game, it's going to be composed of basically two factors. You're going to have an expansion and sort of occupation phase where you are building out this tiled grid, adding resources like production, things that you're going to be able to use for actions later on in the turn, or to achieve missions, kind of accomplish tasks, things like that. So you're going to be slowly building out this region that you're occupying, along with placing down your territory markers.
Well, they're not territory markers. Those are the hubs of civilization that we're bringing in.
So
Come on,
placing down your hubs of civilization that allow you to generate resources.
Sure.
Then in the second stage of the game, everyone's going to be going through and taking a series of actions. A mix of free actions that you're able to do however much you'd like, and official orders. These are going to be game-growing or game-changing abilities. Things like expanding your territory or expanding kind of the spread of your civilization markers, right? Doing things like placing an action card that kills off your friend's crew member or kills off your friend's leader, or special leader abilities. There's a lot of depth when it comes into the card play and your specific tableau or your crew play and abilities.
So if we were to distill this would essentially be a resource management, tableau-building, area control.
You can certainly come in here and take people's territory. You can push people out. So it's not quite area control, but there's some squabbling for resource availability.
Well, some of the accolades that you put out there, these can change.
Yep.
And one of the accolades we had out there was for how many territories you control. So you can get points for that.
Of course, it's not the traditional territory control where you have people fighting and all that. It's all through kind of like these hubs that you're essentially establishing here.
Correct.
So there's a lot of interesting mix of mechanics with almost like an abstract map to a certain point. So there's a lot here to kind of like delve into, right?
So we'll get into the gameplay in a bit. We're going to dive into the things that we think is, because I think we're getting to that point, right? Let's go ahead and touch on the theme. And the best way to do that is for one of you to find the rule book for me. Because
found it.
I just love flavor text.
Little flavor text.
Anyone who watches shows knows that I absolutely adore flavor text, so we're going to go ahead and read a little bit of it. In the year 2092, 6 corporations funded a spaceship called the GCC Intrepid and launched it from Earth's orbit. Its mission was to establish a colony of 5,066 people in Comis 2, the first planet outside our solar system found to have liquid water on its surface. On approach to the planet, a vessel affectionately known as the Lander was launched from the main colony ship carrying a 66-person crew. This was comprised of engineers, scientists, operations staff, and corporate representatives. The purpose of their mission was to prepare the colony base for the arrival of the 5,000 people aboard GCC Intrepid 6 years later. On Comes 2, all pioneers would be assigned to work for a corporation. In the spirit of efficiency, it was agreed that the fairest way to determine the corporation's share of the pioneers would be to measure its contribution to colony development. The relative value of this contribution would be measured by mission stars. When the lander entered the planet's atmosphere, an electrical storm temporarily scrambled the navigation system, resulting in a crash that killed most of the crew on impact and damaged the life support systems that were used in the colony base.
Okay.
The survivors must work with the colony-wide artificial intelligence system known as QUIN, Quantum Unilinear Intelligent Neural Network, to complete as many missions as possible. The corporation that amasses the most mission stars by the time the Intrepid arrives will be the market leader going forward. Your story begins here. So that's the theme of this game.
Right.
How does it tie to the actual gameplay?
Well, it starts off with a disaster.
Starts off a little rough.
For everyone.
Yeah. And it just keeps on giving.
One of the things that I like is that it sets up and explains why you have kind of a small, scrappy crew.
Right.
It sets up the time frame and the point of the objective. Is it gives the star, the victory points, something that is important.
Right.
You understand why you're expanding and trying to like harness resources and be in this area. And I think you brought up a fair point. Like, the theme starts off a little rough, and you can feel the struggle throughout the course of the game. These cards are not forgiving. You're gonna have things like poisoning a fellow corporation's crew members.
You're gonna develop a nice little engine, and then there's gonna be a gas leak, and
something horrible's gonna happen.
Leader's gonna die.
Yeah, potentially. Now,
all those skills go away.
It's important to note here that we are talking towards the kind of normal or advanced level of this game. There are modifiers. There are 3 ways to play this game.
Yeah.
The way that we're talking about is a little bit more cutthroat. However,
we did play the hardest level when we were trying to do this.
In the beginner levels, these event cards that trigger a gas explosion or the ability to poison fellow players is not quite as profound. So if we're already convincing you not to back because of some of the interplay we're talking about, that doesn't have to exist in the game. That being said, it is part of why we found this game interesting.
And you also said, though, that the developers were coming up with maybe a way of giving every character a med pack in the beginning.
Some mitigation.
Some ways of mitigating some of the harsh realities that can happen.
Through the amount of playtesting they've had, that has been something that the fans have been brought up. Some people just don't like the take that or the complete kind of shutdown of one of your engines.
Right.
And so they are working in player mitigation into this system. It's one of the many ways that they've changed the game throughout the course of playtesting that I actually think was really cool, because we had a chance to play this game without checking the updated rules. We played it based off the prototype they sent us. And then we went through and read the email that they sent saying, here's what we've decided to change due to feedback from the community, from everyone at the FLGSs that are playing this game. And there were 3 or 4 points in that email where we had a frustration, and they had resolved it
already.
in that email. They'd already been thinking about it, already been adjusting the game.
For example, cycling through crew members.
Initially, in the initial rule set, you were able only to pull the first cryopod out of the ship, kind of like in turn order, and that's who you had to unlock and develop. Well, it shuts down your engine a little bit, even though it might be thematic. Here, you're going to be able to pay extra resources to cycle through and look at the crew members available, look at like a manifest of the top 3, and then re-put the other ones down at the bottom. So spin them around that rack a little bit. So yeah, they have developed this game in some interesting ways, but that might be later of the conversation.
Correct.
I've read my flavor text. That's really what I wanted out of the theme. I'm sure they're going to have atmospheric stuff on the Kickstarter page for you guys to check out, but that's the world that we're playing in.
But in terms of thematic ties, how do you guys feel about this?
Well, and this is kind of bridge over to our next point, the gameplay itself.
Yeah.
So you can answer the thematic ties, but let's also touch on what elements of gameplay stand out that would make you consider backing it.
So this particular game has a few very interesting things. To me, it almost feels like a lighter take on terraforming Mars. Because there's tableau building, it's in the theme as well, but at the same time it's very brisk. You're not doing too much, there's not too many cards in front of you. Everything is stacking upon an already established personnel or an already established pool of actions, and you're just kind of building towards that, right? The idea that the map itself kind of generates resources throughout the game is also interesting, because there's a point to conquering that particular tile. There's a point of going here, there's a point of developing. It's not just expanding.
You're not only choosing where to expand this map, you are also choosing where to expand yourself, expand your own control. So I could place a tile down, giving you access to something that maybe I don't want.
And I also like that it's not just about expanding the map.
Sure.
You can also be upgrading. So here we got the food.
Every tile has a potential to upgrade up to 3 times.
You can spend some of these resources to upgrade the production values of each one of these individual tiles.
Yeah. One of the gameplay elements that I actually find intriguing and that I enjoy is going to be the way you build out your crew manifest down here. I like the way that there are personality traits and skill traits that you have to have in order to unlock item cards, special abilities, or you buff based on the different types of personalities you have. So for instance, down here, Pablo, he's innovative and resilient. He also has an engineering skill of 3 and a special leadership ability. With certain items, I could give him science. I could buff his engineering. I might need to have him innovative to allow him to unlock a special ability. Your crew here has to have personality traits and abilities and experience equal to the missions you're trying to complete. Now, that being said, this is also complicated. It's not overwhelming, but there is a lot going on. You do have to build out and lean into a character quite a bit. And so one thing that people should consider when getting into this game is playing it a time or two, getting familiar with the strategies, the type of cards that are going to be in the deck, the way that these systems chain together and pair is going to be really important.
Yeah, so that's going to be with the missions, because each mission is going to have certain prerequisites that you have to have. They may apply to, you might have to find the skills among all of your crew, or maybe they have to be just attributed to one of your crew members. Same thing with these action cards. In order to play these action cards, you might have to have certain
covert
skill
resources.
sets.
You have to have, among your crew, you have to have at least one person who's resourceful.
Right.
And they have to have a science skill, or at least one person that has a science skill of 5. Because your crew working together will then be able to do this action.
Correct.
I like that. I think as far as thematically, that plays really well. Understanding that why these abilities are being able to be done. Building a crew that can then take advantage of some of the actions you've had from the start of your game is key, right?
Yep.
It is, however, heavier. There is a lot. It was confusing when we first stepped into it.
Yes, it was.
And so that's something to consider.
Yeah, I also really like the idea of, so first of all, the artwork here could be subjective, but at the end of the day, they're trying to go for a very personable feel, right? They're trying for you to associate feelings to each of these people.
They have individuals with sort of a video game-esque coverage set on a video game background. I personally, this is probably one of my sticking points in this game. I'm not a giant fan of the artwork. It has a bit of an uncanny valley feel to it. That was a barrier to me getting into the game initially.
Oh, see, it actually helped draw me in a little bit.
Did it really?
Because you associate, right? It feels
like,
real.
Oh, yeah, this is a real person there.
Yeah, exactly.
And from Pakistan, and I can see where they're from. I'm giving them a little backstory in my head.
And the idea that you're building on top of these personality traits, and every time they evolve as people and they learn new things throughout their tenure of 6 years, is also thematic and kind of builds into that idea of, this is not just an idealized version of terraforming a new planet.
Yeah.
This is, you're going through the thick of it.
You're investing in your crew. So you give them training, you give them items.
And more so than a planet kind of expansion game. You're not terraforming. This place is ready to be harvested. It's got water on it.
You're building the people.
This is a crew building game.
Yep.
This is where the gameplay is. Along with that, the other element that is salient is the way you score victory points. You have to complete a series of hidden and open missions.
Correct.
These could be accolade cards. These are bonuses we get for having a certain amount of power or growth. And they could also be these mission cards. For instance, here we have one. It's a research mission. You must fight limitations. Explore different particle filtration designs for the Herc engines to operate in severe weather. Cool flavor text there.
That's just flavor text. That doesn't
And then
mean anything.
what it takes to do this. Required on one of our crew members, we need them to be resourceful, strategic, and have an operations experience of 7. And then we have to be able to pay the resources to do it. So this is one person that needs to spend a year of their life potentially researching this information in order to upgrade the colony or allow people to survive.
And one of the cool things about these two mission and accolade cards is that, for example, the accolades feel almost like a tug of war, right?
Sure.
I'm ahead, the other person's ahead, I might be 5 steps ahead
based
later.
on growth and expansion.
This is how that works.
Gold and silver are definitely more time-based. It's about going there, the specific juncture of the game, grabbing that card for yourself, and slowly harnessing all that power.
One thing to note, though, however, and it's kind of go back to what I was talking about on my tableau here, mixed with the amount of chaining you have on your crews, the action cards that you have in your hand, along with the fact that you're working towards objectives, there's a lot going on here. There is a lot of moving pieces to follow, a lot of interplay, and that can be great. If you like games that have, and I don't know how many chains, how many different possibilities of connections and crew builds and styles of gameplay you could do. However, if you get overwhelmed really easily by a lot of things in your hand or a lot of different objectives to go for.
Or trying to monitor what your opponents have got that they can do.
Yeah, that's something to consider before you decide to back.
And another thing about this particular game is that there's a lot of variability in terms of that difficulty. I think they've worked really hard to accommodate every type of gamer out there.
So I think that bridges over into the accessibility part, right? How hard is this going to be to get to the table when it actually arrives at your doorstep? Is it going to be a game that you backed, or one that you're excited to get on the table and play, that your friends are going to be willing to sit down with you? Right off the bat, this took us some energy to learn.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on, and because of that, with the current state of the rules, the current state of the setup guide, they've taken some steps to help you. But man, there were some like rules clarifications and really, really just fine details because of the interplay.
As we got going, though, I started to, because I was the one who didn't read the rules or anything. You explained it to me, so I came in lost.
Hi.
But as we went through it, I started picking up on all the different elements, and they started to meld and mesh. And so it might be a big lift at first, but it's not something that someone who's used to a medium weight game is going to be overwhelmed by.
Well, and another thing to note, one thing that you were bringing up, Jan, is the levels of play.
Yeah.
They have taken steps to take what we were describing, the advanced game that we're describing, and bring it or walk people into that system.
Yeah. I think it's tricky because even though it is simple, this is not a gateway game, right? This is not something you're going to find in a Walmart, you're going to find at Target. This is a gamer's game. And at the end of the day, it'll always be a gamer's game. But the way that they've kind of reworked that system in order to make it much more accessible for gamers, I think it's commendable.
So right now they have 3 current levels. They have a beginner scale, they have a intermediate scale, and then they have the normal or the advanced mode. I don't know if they're going to have a harder scale. They certainly might by the time it comes to publication, although the normal mode was hard on its own. That being said, they introduce mechanics slowly throughout the course of that gameplay. Adding things like event cards that are a little bit more take that, or mixing in or removing full stacks of crew cards and training cards. And those are things that really can change up or complicate the game.
Right. Now, one thing I haven't seen before are those 3 little booklets.
Yep.
And each one of those corresponds to one of the difficulty levels. And it's mainly for setup. But it does walk you through all the various things you need to keep in mind when you're setting up a game.
Without having to go through this.
I really appreciated for a prototype that had such a heavy rule book.
Yeah.
They tied it down into this. The rules for each one of these scenarios are on a single open page in the book. And all of the specifics, details, added questions are fully written out in the back or the reference guide of the book. And we did have to reference them. Like, there were moments where just the interplay, we had to go find out how it worked. Because we didn't know. But we were able to get the game set up and things up and running fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I think this bridges into our next point when it comes to discussing this. Let's talk about the prototype itself. Not that publishers need perfect games when they send out prototypes, but they need something that we can play, that the audience can engage with. So let's talk about the current development status of this game. Where is it? Where would we like to see it go? And what can backers expect?
Well, I gotta say, for a prototype game, they put a lot of time into this. These cards are pretty good quality. The components all look really nice. It seems to fit together well. There were a couple of areas that I would like to see some improvements in the mechanics.
Sure.
But overall, for a prototype game, a game that hasn't yet launched on Kickstarter, I thought this one seems fairly polished.
Well, they did something unique with it, right? They went to China, had meetings there for a significant amount of time to figure out a way to put a market order in for 160 final-ish copies or prototype-ish copies of their game so they could send it out to have people play in person. They needed something farther along than your average prototype necessarily has to be.
It's an ingenious way of playtesting at a massive scale.
It's an interesting way. I mean, they've had a ton of playtesters, a ton of feedback, and like we said, the feedback that they've gotten with some of the frustrations that we were feeling initially, they've already started to address. I would like to see, if I'm talking about where I'd like to see this go, I really feel like a professional needs to sit down and refine the setup guides, refine the rule book. It's not that things weren't there to find, but from a usability standpoint, there was some minutia or some flow that I couldn't quite pick up on. And so I would like to see it refined by someone who has experience in writing and reading rule books, which I don't have, but I know the difference between one that's comfortable.
I did sit down and I picked up that book.
Yeah.
And I said, whoa, this is dense.
Yeah, and it's not a dense game.
It's not.
It doesn't merit something this heavy, right?
Oh, it feels good, but yeah, that's not all instructions. There's a lot of reference, a lot of card detail, a lot of nitty-gritty.
Which I appreciate being there.
Yeah.
But I do, and I can't quite put my finger on where it is, but there is a difference between a rule book where I sit down and I actually enjoy the process of reading, because there's some where I start understanding how things connect, and the way that it's written allows me to almost play the game in my mind before I've started.
Sure.
This rulebook didn't feel like that yet. So if you're sitting down to read the rulebook, to try to get a sense of this game, our suggestion to the designers and the developers is either have the community, have experienced people on BGG, which could be a dangerous thing to offer, or go out and source someone that has a ton of experience writing accessible rulebook.
I have to say, this is one of the areas where I think that a Kickstarter makes a lot of sense, because if it's run right, so if you offer that rule book out to the community for comment, you're going to get a lot of good feedback.
Sure.
And so I think that's just a great way of trying to hone in on what's a good product.
I would also love to see some player aids and some reference cards. We have these that give you your turn order reference cards, and the iconography on it is actually pretty readable.
Yeah.
Like, I was able to understand the complexity of this pattern pretty well, almost without a problem. That being said, I would like to see that page, that turn structure, the order, the key terms, broken down into a quick reference guide, so we don't have to dive into the book as much.
Yeah, so in essence, I would summarize the following in terms of where this is in its development.
Okay.
I think you can tell that this is coming from a set of new designers.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of elements here that are still not... There's not the confidence that I've seen in other games, right? This is not a game where you would go expecting a 10-year design from a Vitar Lacerda. There's space here for adaptation, and there's space here to listen. This is not a finalized product. As you said, people are commenting, and they're adapting, and they're updating. So when you approach this Kickstarter, don't come expecting a completely finalized game that's ready 100% to go out of the door. This is something of more of a collaborative nature, where you will have a voice in that design. You will have the opportunity to leave a mark on this to a certain point, because the developers have shown that they're willing to listen.
Yeah,
and they're willing to accept that feedback. And I think that applies to everything in this game.
And not only listen and accept, but they've also applied, which to me makes the difference between being willing to listen.
Yeah.
They've taken that feedback and emailed me changes they've made since I got the prototype that addressed things that we were concerned with.
And the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of people, when they go to Kickstarters, they don't want that. A lot of people's, I want a finished game and I want it to be perfect, and I want it to be perfect now. And sometimes that's just not a reality. And it's important to know that difference. But if you're willing to take a chance on this and give them an opportunity, which I think we're going to be able to address very soon, why you should.
Sure.
It's an interesting one to explore.
One point that I think I've heard you express, though, Matt, is when it comes to the gameplay, there is something that piques your... Like, you can see the framework for a good game here, one that intrigues you, that brings you back.
Yeah, I mean, without having read the rules, as it started to mesh...
Just gonna keep bringing that up.
I know. As it started to mesh...
Sure.
As it started to melt, I look at my action cards and go, oh, all I have to do to steal Jesse's titanium factory is just get my engineer to have the fanatical ability.
Yeah. Which is like,
and
all I had to do was
to
poison you.
And then you killed my guy.
Was to get my science up by 1.
And this is the sort of give and take that I love in a game. So building that engine up and then seeing it come crashing down in ruin before I was able to execute, it was frustrating.
Yeah.
But it was. I still was enjoying it.
And so as far as the current development status goes, there's things we'd like to see improved on. This is certainly a prototype version, and you can tell it comes from a new publisher, right? They are working and listening, and this was printed before a ton of feedback came in, and they have responded to that feedback and made changes accordingly. I hope to see them continue to do the same thing. As the community hopefully supports this, as it gains funding and comes to kind of a published state, I'd love to see them continue adapting, changing, and listening to the people who are excited about this game.
It's a strong first showing.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and swing into the publisher themselves.
What do you need to know?
Not everything you need to know. It's
Exactly.
hard for us to know the publisher in and out, right? I mean, everyone has elements in their production and schedule and all the minutia of what goes into humans.
Yeah.
That is hard for us to talk to. So what we can talk about is what we've observed so far, what they've told us themselves, and our thoughts around them being a new publisher versus an established one. If we're talking about publishers that have a showing on Kickstarter, that have delivered, remarkable products multiple times, or if in this case, it is a game that will not come to print unless a Kickstarter community backs it.
Right. So I think they've been very smart about this. So first thing that comes to mind whenever you're working with a first-time publisher, what is it? Am I going to get my game? How am I assured that my game is going to be here in 2 or 3 or 4 years?
Well, they delivered 160
Exactly.
of them.
They've already created this game.
They've done it on
They
a...
already went through the manufacturing process, and it was a completely new thing for them, but they did it, and they did it well. It's right here. It works.
Yeah.
So that's already a testament to how committed this particular duo, Intrepid Games, is.
Yeah, and whenever I'm looking at a first-time Kickstarter as well, I'm always asking myself, are they biting off more than they can chew? Is this too ambitious of a project?
Do they have 837 miniatures?
Right, exactly. Things like that. The components on this are relatively simple. There's nothing here that's going to require an awful lot of tooling.
And there is a chance that some components will change or there'll be upgrades or adaptions. We're not entirely sure what the 100% finished product will be like, but they have gone through that chain.
Which is, to me, the important thing.
Yeah, I think it's a really strong point. Along with that, I just have to say, there's been a lot of talk in the community around their distribution model. The fact that they want gamers to get it in their hands before they decide to back it.
Right.
That is both kind of cool. It's neat, because
Bold,
normally
brave,
we're the only ones that get to test a game
Exactly.
before it comes to Kickstarter. So I'm talking to an audience that hopefully have had the chance to play this. If you've watched to this point, look at their map. Go to their website. They're encouraging people while the Kickstarter's live to go table this game before backing it. It's a neat idea. But here's the thing. It's also risky.
Yeah.
It's the reason publishers don't do this is because it's cost up front. It's time, effort, and resources into getting a game in front of people that could pay off. Certainly hope to see that it does. But if you like this model of distribution, if you want to encourage them for kind of the leap of faith they've taken in the community, take the time to examine this game. Take the time to see if it's going to be right for you. And if it is, hop on board.
It's definitely worth a look.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's nearby, go try it out.
So another point that you're bringing up that I think is fascinating is that for a first-time designer to be so brave and present a design to the entire world and not be fearful of what that feedback must be, that shows confidence, that shows determination. And I think that's when I go for first-time publishers, that's another trait I'm always focusing on. Are these trustworthy? Are these people that are going to stick with this product until the end?
Yeah.
And I think they've proven that as well. And
I think it's neat. I mean, I really do. I am nervous for them, but I also have a lot of respect for kind of the way that they've tried to experiment on this platform.
And let's talk a little bit about them as well. This is obviously going to be on the Kickstarter page itself, but they shared with us their story of how this began. And I think that's really fascinating. They were two guys that started preparing a game 5 years ago, and people started commenting, "Hey, this is like really cool."
Friends and family.
Yeah, this is like really cool. Why aren't you guys like making this as your livelihood? And they looked at each other and they were like, yeah, we should totally do that. And that was when they first found out about Kickstarter. That's when they found out about the board, like
they started
the overall
looking
world.
into the board game space beyond the basics, and ran into the fact that they couldn't play any of the games on Kickstarter before they backed them, and it was a year later, right?
Yep.
One of the frustrations that we all have to some degree until you become a content creator, and then you get to play everything.
That's the secret.
No, I think it's a cool point, and it's why they came up with the idea. They also spent a year sourcing manufacturing in China, figuring out how to get a production run of this game cost effective enough to allow them to print 160 copies. Because a little bit behind the scenes knowledge when it comes to Kickstarters, you need to produce a production run of something like 2,000 to 3,000 copies in order to justify a print for China to even be interested in you, which means you're selling, on Kickstarter, you're possibly selling 350 to 500 games, which gives you enough to bring in a whole stack more and hopefully sell those at and hopefully sell those at conventions. And most first-time publishers don't make a significant amount of money, certainly not for the time and energy invested in bringing their game to the table. So it's worth highlighting, I guess, all of those components, right? Yeah. The reason they went through this process is because they had something they cared about, that their friends and family thought was fun, and they decided to share it out with the world.
And this has gone through 800 unique plays from the designers, and since they threw it out onto the world, it has even more play testing under it. So there's a lot of work that's been put into this.
I mean, a lot of people have play tested it. Yeah. So there's been a lot of feedback that they've received, which means if a game like this that deals with tableau building, deals with economic resource management, a little bit of crossplay, a lot of card play, victory point scoring based on conditions, if that's your type of game, there's a chance the way that this one chains and pairs and works itself together could be of interest to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about the final kind of factor when it comes to our Kickstarter idea. And again, this is a newer format, so I'll talk a little bit more broadly here. But we can't talk on value on everything. We don't know what extra editions are coming out. We don't even know the hard price of this game. What we can say, though, is from our sense of things, what's the value in the prototype or the core box that we've gotten? Is there anything we feel like is missing? And if there were expansions, do you think people should be going all in? Would you probably think there's enough gameplay, like playability here in the core that we have?
Yeah.
What's your sense?
That's a good question, because there's been so many times where I've ended up buying an expansion and then thinking to myself,
I didn't need the
I
expansion.
didn't really need it.
And this is one that's hard
and
for
I
us
never
to tell.
get the expansions to the table. Sure. This one I feel like has got enough content in just the core that we've played. I don't know if an expansion would be something I'd be interested in beyond that.
Yeah.
Because this is enough.
I think the core game of this is incredibly solid. One thing that I would be interested in if I was backing this game, and I don't know if they're going to offer it or not, but if the option was there for a little bit of upgraded components, whether it was like these be a little bit chunky or be made of a material that clicks together in a different way.
Oh, you like metal, don't you?
I do. Or even these resource cubes. I like things to be a little bit more produced.
Weighty.
Well, let's remember this is a first-time publisher.
I know.
Those type of things.
And I don't know if those things will exist. But if there are component upgrades available, whether they're metal coins or upgraded components or upgraded boards, I would pay for them.
I would love recess boards for this.
I think
that would be fantastic.
I think recess boards would be nice. However, they would create a complication with stacking your cards here.
Yeah, there's a
really.
slide things on this, so I don't know about the recess.
It's not slide. You actually put your 10 triangles there. You're supposed to put 10, so you don't slide it.
All right, stop arguing, boys. I would like recess boards. I think just a thicker board might be nicer.
Yeah.
Recess boards, because I stack item cards underneath them and upgrades or kind of experience above them. It might get a little bit more in the way if it was actually recessed. It really depends. I don't know. I mean, I guess this line already is a barrier there to start with.
I do like lighter weight things when I'm going to be tucking underneath.
That's a fair point.
So I think that this is probably the right weight for me.
Yeah, well, and it was easy to tuck underneath. I noticed you doing that during the gameplay, and I actually started copying you. So, as far as the core box goes, we feel like there's probably enough gameplay in the core box. I personally, if you're getting the game and they have any upgraded components available, would vote in favor of them, just because I like upgraded components. That being said, if you're like me, I always just hit the all or nothing button anyway. That's why I
don't have that luxury.
I have a bad habit on Kickstarter of just kind of going all in. That's going to end kind of the format of this structure. One other thing that I know backers have been asking for, our Patreon community wanted to see in the conversation, that I'm still not to a point where I'm entirely comfortable doing, especially not without a group here, so we didn't list it in our kind of title guide, is comparisons or examples of other games that exist in this space. Now, I have to be honest, this might make me a poor reviewer. I don't know of a lot that I've played that directly relate to this.
Well, I immediately think of Terraforming Mars.
Yep, same here.
Thematically, I haven't. I own it.
You haven't played it.
I haven't played it.
Well, Terraforming Mars, you're developing the planet.
Sure.
You're. I've only played it the once, Jan.
So basically in Terraforming Mars, what you do is that you have a singular board, and everybody together is building upon that board, trying to bring in new resources, trying to change the planet for the better. So actually together they are working towards shared objectives. And they're working towards, depending on what modules you're playing with, secret missions. And you're also trying to collect resources and earn an income at the beginning of every round or every age or whatever it's set there.
But again, you're all playing different corporations, correct?
Yep, and it feels like a corporation. It doesn't feel unique, right? It's broad strokes type of strategy here.
But it also feels much more contained. It feels safer. This feels like it's a dangerous situation that you're in and you're trying to manage.
Like you crash landed onto the planet.
Yeah, this feels to me a little bit more like The Martian, where you're in there trying
surviving.
to...
You got to make potatoes.
You're trying to grow the potatoes.
You know how I would kind of frame this? In Terraforming Mars, you're the company. Here, you're the employees. You're the employees doing all the big things that you would have done in Terraforming Mars.
Here's a salient question. Would people who enjoyed Terraforming Mars potentially enjoy this game? And what are the points? Is it this player base? Is that the big difference and the danger here?
I'll be honest. I am not a huge Terraforming Mars fan.
Okay.
I actually got a little frustrated with all of the different cards that were out there in the bookkeeping, which this actually has some of the same sort of elements.
Yeah, same DNA.
But I don't know why this one was a little bit more compelling. And I think part of it was a little bit of the danger element that was there. I'm a more competitive person, so when we're all going at the same...
When you realize you can steal
all have the same objectives, but suddenly, I can steal your resources, or I can kill your scientist. I get a little more enjoyed.
So let's be clear. We're not saying this is better or worse or anything like that. No. We're talking about the pure essence of the game, right? Terraforming Mars is a masterclass of design. No one's competing with that. But this does have that same DNA. It has that same structure. And if you're looking for something that's a little bit lighter, but at the same time more confrontational, and when we're talking about confrontation, we're talking about direct confrontation.
With the planet and with the players.
This might be something that you would enjoy like Matt did.
Yeah, and I think... Again, coming from someone that hasn't played it, I do think it's a salient point to note in Terraforming Mars, like you said, you're playing the corporations. I like that in this, you're building your hub of people. It's your scrappy crew doing their best to survive on the planet.
Yeah, you're investing in these characters. You're giving them training. You're giving them items.
Or assassinating your friends.
True.
Whatever the case. Thank you for joining us. This, again, it's an experiment. We're trying to play with the way we approach Kickstarter videos.
Right.
We want the discussion to be deeper and more thorough without being a hard yes or no in any direction. We want to be able to show off games and let you know by the end of a video, or let you know in the middle or the very beginning after I've finished reading the flavor text, if it's a game that you're going to be interested in backing. Because ultimately, the goal for us is for more people to back games on Kickstarter. Let's be honest about that. I love the platform. It's brought some amazing titles to my door. But I want every game you back on Kickstarter to be one you're excited about, and one that when it arrives, you get to the table. Right?
So you're still thinking
I want you to back way more, but I want you to play the games that show up.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the key. If you've enjoyed this format, leave a comment down below letting us know what you think, what we can do differently in the future, what areas of conversation we should spend less time on, more time on, if there's whole topics or subsections we might have missed. And along with that, when we send our questionnaire that we're currently developing to publishers, what should be on there? What do you want to hear them answer for themselves that we bring you through our own voice and our own media? We'd love to have your insight. And if you made it to this point in the video, I'm just going to assume you're subscribed. I'm also going to assume you're backing our Patreon.
And also that you visited the website, right?
Well, here's the thing. If you enjoyed this more conversational style of video, it's one of the unique things we do here on the channel. We have a lot more of that over on the Patreon. We're running a few kind of special series and episodes over there. We have some, exclusive gameplay, solo and multiplayer. And so
write-ups.
Yeah, and so if you're interested in seeing the behind the scenes of what we do, getting extra content, audio-only content, we're working on the format for a podcast. It's going to our Patreon members first as they help us refine and develop. And if you want to be a part of developing ideas like the Before You Back system, then swing over there. All you have to do is toss in $1. It goes a long way to show us that you support us, helps you engage with the community, and also, honestly, a big part of it is letting publishers know that we have an active audience that is interested in what we produce. I don't want to understate how valuable and important that is to us. It cost Matt $10, but we'll discuss that later.
But whatever you do,
remember to do the important thing.
Get out there.
Sorry.
Get out there and play some games.
We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.